My granddaddy taught me one thing: never let anyone steal what your family built. So when my local HOA planted a campground sign on my wheat field and told strangers they had the right to camp there, I didn't just get mad, I got even. They thought they could bully an old farmer off his land. They had no idea who they were messing with. It started like any other quiet Saturday morning on the Richardson family farm. The rooster crowed, the coffee percolated, and I was getting ready to feed the chickens, until the sharp buzz of dirt bikes shattered the peace. I looked out the window, and my heart dropped. 3 teenagers were tearing through my north field, their tires kicking up mud and tearing through the winter wheat I'd planted just last fall. I rushed outside, waving my arms. "Hey, this is private land! You need to leave!" I called out. One boy lifted his helmet and pointed toward a sign I'd never seen before. "The HOA lady said this is the community's recreation area," he said, confused. I walked over and stared at the sign. It was new, professional, firmly staked into my soil. Pinarest Gardens, Community Recreation Area. My jaw tightened. This wasn't just a prank. Someone had gone to the trouble of making it official looking, and planting it without my knowledge. Now, I've lived on this farm my whole life. It's been in my family for over 70 years. My granddad built the barn with his own 2 hands. My late wife loved the view of golden wheat swaying under the mountains. That land is more than just acreage. It's legacy. And now some suburban HOA thinks they can walk in and claim it? The boys left without trouble, but I couldn't shake the unease. I pulled the sign out of the ground and marched back to the house, fuming. This wasn't the first time the HOA from next door had tried to edge in on my land. But this was different. It wasn't just nosy neighbors anymore. It felt coordinated, calculated. I called the HOA president, Mrs. Lockhart. Her voice turned cold the second she heard my name. "That land has been part of our community space for years," she insisted. "Check your deed." But I had checked it, every inch of it. I knew my boundaries like the back of my hand. That morning, I realized something. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a land grab, and I'd just been given my warning shot. Sunday morning, I was sipping coffee by the window when something didn't look right. My north field, usually quiet and untouched, was full of movement. I squinted, set my mug down, and stepped outside. My heart sank. Campers. Dozens of them. Tents going up, coolers being unloaded, kids chasing each other across my wheat. I rushed over, boots still half-laced, and approached a family setting up near my irrigation line. "I'm sorry, but this is private property," I said firmly. The father looked at me, puzzled. "This is the Pinarest Gardens community campsite. We reserved it through the HOA." I felt a chill creep up my spine. "This is Richardson Farm," I replied. "This land's been in my family for generations. There's no campground here." A woman stepped forward holding a folded map, one with printed HOA branding, highlighting my north field as recreational space. My jaw tightened. They all had maps. They all had reservations. And all of it pointed straight into land that never, ever belonged to the HOA. Then came the cherry on top. A black Range Rover rolled up, and out stepped Mrs. Lockhart, HOA president dressed like she was attending a country club brunch. "Good morning," she chimed to the campers, completely ignoring me. When I demanded an explanation, she smiled and said, "The agreement was signed in 2008, Mr. Richardson. This land has been community space for quite some time." I'd never signed such a thing. My hands trembled with anger. She turned back to the crowd. "Don't mind him. Mr. Richardson's just confused. Enjoy your weekend." With that, she dismissed me like a dog barking at a fence line. I stood there, surrounded by people trampling my wheat and using my land like a public park, and realized something deep in my gut. This wasn't a mistake. It was theft. Back inside, I stared out the window at what used to be my field. Now a campsite complete with a portable toilet right over my irrigation access. Mrs. Lockhart had crossed a line, and I was going to find out just how far she planned to go. By Sunday morning, the trespassing wasn't just a misunderstanding, it had turned into a full-scale invasion. I woke up to the sound of laughter and voices outside my bedroom window. When I pulled back the curtain, my heart dropped. Tents. Dozens of them. Folding chairs, fire pits, portable grills, all spread across my north field like it was a state park. I could barely believe my eyes. Families had set up camp, on land my grandfather had plowed, where my late wife once planted sunflowers. I threw on jeans and boots and headed out, trying to keep my composure as I approached a group unrolling a canopy near my irrigation line. "Folks, I'm sorry, but you're on private property," I said, voice steady but firm. The father looked confused. "The HOA told us this was the official community campground," he explained. "We paid good money for this weekend." He wasn't the only one. One by one, more families gathered, all waving identical printed maps and emails from the Pinterest HOA. Each showed my land, my north field, marked as a public amenity. I tried to stay calm. "This is the Richardson family farm," I said. "That land has never been anything but ours, not HOA, not public." They didn't argue. They just looked bewildered. But they didn't leave either. Then came the final insult. A crew rolled up in a van and began unloading a portable restroom unit on my field, right near my irrigation access. I couldn't believe it. A woman approached, clipboard in hand, smiling like she was managing a wedding venue. "Excuse me," I asked, "who gave you permission to set that up here?" She replied cheerfully, "We have HOA approval. It's all part of the Pinterest Gardens event." HOA approval. For my land. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to shout. Not long after, the HOA queen herself arrived. Mrs. Lockhart. White pantsuit, pastel blouse, pearl earrings. She acted like this was all perfectly normal, like I was the one causing a disruption. "Mr. Richardson, we've already gone over this," she said, barely glancing at me. "This land has been designated recreational space for over a decade. Our records are very clear." When I asked for proof, she waved me off, telling the campers to enjoy their day. I stood alone on the edge of my own field, watching strangers trample crops, children dig holes where I'd laid irrigation, and a woman I barely knew give orders like she owned the place. My hands shook with helpless anger. No amount of maps or smiles could change the truth. They were trespassing, and they knew it. I went back to my house, heart pounding, and grabbed my property folder. If they were going to steal my land in broad daylight, then I'd fight them in the light too, one step at a time. By Monday morning, I knew this was bigger than a misunderstanding. This was theft, plain and simple. And I wasn't going to sit quietly while my family's land was stolen out from under me with smiles and forged signatures. I sat in my lawyer Frank Watson's office, the man who had helped my parents draft their wills and settle boundary disputes back in the 80s. As he flipped through the photographs I'd taken of campers, tents, and the portable bathroom now stinking up my wheat field, his face went pale. "They installed a toilet on your land without permits?" he asked, incredulous. "That's not just a property issue. That's a liability nightmare." "And that's not even the worst of it," I replied, unfolding the printed reservation map a camper had handed me. "They're passing out maps that label my north field as a community recreation area." Frank leaned in, scanning the fine print. "This looks official, but there's no record of this ever being filed through the county, at least not the legal way." Then came the bombshell. The HOA lawyer joined our call and casually stated that I had, according to their records, signed an agreement in 2008 that transferred recreational usage rights to the HOA. My heart nearly stopped. I never signed such a thing. But the lawyer was calm and smug. "We've been paying property taxes on it since 2008, and Judge Lockhart himself signed off on the boundary clarification." Judge Lockhart, Mrs. Lockhart's husband. It all clicked. That evening, I drove straight to the county clerk's office. Miss Walker, who'd known my family since I was a boy, helped me dig through every tax record and deed on file. 6 straight hours. Finally, we found something odd, an annotation dated 2009, boundary adjusted per Municipal Code 47.3, but the reference documentation? Missing. That's strange, Miss Walker said, frowning. That kind of adjustment requires a public hearing, notification, and notarized signatures. You should have gotten a certified letter. I didn't get anything, I replied, my voice tightening. She checked the system's access logs. That file was pulled last month by the clerk for Judge Lockhart. The anger I felt in that moment was unlike anything I'd known. They'd rigged the system, used their power and connections to quietly rewrite history. But they left fingerprints. I raced home, dug out my grandfather's original deeds, the old irrigation maps, and the hand-drawn boundary sketches he'd made before computers were even in use. They matched the tax maps perfectly. I had proof. Not just of ownership, but of fraud. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought an old farmer wouldn't fight back. But they forgot something. I know this land like I know my own heartbeat, and no piece of paper, no forged signature, no HOA board was going to erase what my family built. I always knew something didn't sit right about this so-called community campsite, but it wasn't until Elaine showed up with those papers that the full scope of the betrayal came into focus. Rain was tapping against the windows when she knocked on my door, soaked to the bone and breathing hard. She'd never looked so serious. "We need to talk," she said, pulling a wrinkled folder from under her coat. "I found these in Mrs. Lockhart's home office while cleaning yesterday. Inside were detailed plans, blueprints, financials, mock-ups, all labeled Pinerest Gardens Luxury Glamping Retreat. Fire pits, power hookups, prefab cabins. Not for a community picnic. No, this was a high-end campground experience, right on my land." "They've already sold membership packages," Elaine whispered. "Thousands of dollars each. This isn't about community, it's a business." I stared at the papers, stunned. "They've been pretending this was about family recreation," I muttered. "All the while planning to turn it into a resort?" "Exactly," she said. "They're calling it a private retreat for residents and elite guests. That's why they needed your land so badly. It's the only property with creek access." My blood boiled. My grandfather had dug that irrigation creek by hand. Now they wanted to pave over it for luxury cabins and outdoor jacuzzis. Not only were they trying to steal my land, they were planning to profit from it. And all under the nose of the law, with Mrs. Lockhart's HOA title and her judge husband clearing every hurdle behind the scenes. "They've filed plumbing permits under false names," Elaine added. "The water lines? They're hooked into your system, Jimmy. They're running utilities through your wetlands without asking." I stood silent for a long time, the sound of the rain getting heavier outside. I looked across the field, imagining it covered in strangers roasting marshmallows where wheat once grew, the sound of birds replaced by traffic and campfire karaoke. "This isn't about camping," I said finally. "It's a hostile land grab, a scam." Elaine nodded. "And they're almost done pulling it off." "But they'd miscalculated. They thought I was just a quiet farmer. They didn't realize I'd kept every water rights certificate, every deed, and every tax statement. They didn't know I had a network of neighbors just as fed up as I was, people who'd lost koi ponds, front porches, and their sense of peace to the same corrupt board." That night, I went through every file in my grandfather's old chest. I found the original hand-drawn irrigation plan, clearly marking the flow of water, starting from my protected land. They'd tapped into something sacred. The HOA had a secret plan, but now I had one too, and mine was about to leak into theirs. The first blow didn't come with noise. It came with an envelope. I arrived at the county inspector's office early that morning, coffee in hand, ready to dig deeper into what the HOA had been doing behind the scenes. But my keycard didn't work. I buzzed the front desk, thinking it was a glitch. Instead, security showed up. "Sorry, Mr. Richardson," one of them said quietly, avoiding eye contact. "We've been told to escort you to HR." HR? My heart sank. Inside the small conference room, the department director, a woman I'd worked with for 12 years, handed me a letter. "Due to budget restructuring and redundancy in departmental roles, we regret to inform you." The words blurred. I looked up. "This is because of the HOA. Because I'm standing up to them." She hesitated. "Jimmy, you've made some powerful enemies. They'd fired me. I walked out of the building I'd served for over a decade, carrying a box of family photos, old certificates, and my inspector's badge. A quiet rain started to fall as I reached my truck. And then I saw it. A miniature toy gas station glued to my windshield, painted on the side in red, Pine Rest Victory Center. That night my power was cut, followed by a notice from the county claiming I'd violated water use codes on public recreational land. Then came the foreclosure letter from the bank, even though I hadn't missed a payment. And the very next morning, my mailbox was stuffed with HOA complaint forms from neighbors I'd never met. Everything from my porch light being too bright to the shape of my mailbox being inconsistent with neighborhood character. My reputation? They were coming for that too. A local newspaper ran a letter to the editor written by Mr. Thompson from the HOA board, accusing me of hoarding land and disrupting peaceful community development. My phone started ringing with hang-ups. Strangers drove by slowly, sometimes stopping to snap photos. They wanted to isolate me. "They'll ruin you," my lawyer warned over the phone. "This isn't just about property anymore. They're trying to make you too toxic to touch." But in their rush to silence me, they'd missed something. I wasn't alone anymore. Elaine dropped off a pie that night, not just for comfort, but with a memory stick hidden under the foil. "More documents," she whispered. "Emails, maps, and one from the judge himself, reviewing permits under his wife's name." And Margaret Tanner, one of the oldest residents in the county, showed up at my porch with a binder. "I've lived through 5 HOAs, she said firmly. "This one's the worst. I've kept records." Even Marcos from zoning, though terrified, called to tell me the back-end server where they were deleting documents, he'd made backups. They could take my job. They could smear my name, but they hadn't broken my spirit. That night, as lightning flashed over the valley, I stood at the edge of my north field, rain soaking through my coat. Across the darkened land, I could see floodlights and tents being set up for the HOA's big event, on soil they never owned. They thought they'd buried me, but I was a farmer. And they'd just watered the wrong seed. I'd spent my life tending the land. My hands knew the soil like an old friend. So when the HOA trespassed, lied, and tried to rip it from under me, I turned not to lawyers or shouting matches, but to the one thing they underestimated: the land itself. The storm rolled in just as I found my answer. It wasn't revenge, not exactly. It was justice, delivered by nature and by the old irrigation system my grandfather had spent half his life perfecting. That Thursday night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, maps spread across the surface like battle plans. My grandfather's notes, yellowed, marked with pencil notations in the margins, detailed the way water moved through our wetlands, how the land drank during the dry months and flushed itself clean during storms. And the HOA? In their arrogance, they'd tapped into that system. When they built that illegal bathroom for their so-called community campsite, they connected their pipes into our farm's irrigation lines. No permits, no inspection, just arrogance and entitlement. Elaine was the one who brought me the last puzzle piece. She showed up soaked from the rain, carrying a folder full of HOA building schematics she'd copied from Mrs. Lockhart's own printer. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "They're calling tomorrow's event a Pinterest Gardens victory celebration. They've invited local officials, even reporters." Right there, next to the chocolate fountain and stage plans, was their pride and joy, the bathroom facility, connected right into my old water lines. I leaned back in my chair, took a long breath, and made a decision. Early Friday morning, just as the rain intensified, I pulled on my boots and coat and made my way to the main control valve behind the old equipment shed. My hands hesitated only a moment before turning the rusted metal wheel. I wasn't dumping sewage on anyone. That would have been illegal. But I was disconnecting unauthorized plumbing tied to my property, restoring the original flow of water through my legally protected wetlands. As the system adjusted, the already flooded field began to do what nature does best when tampered with. It responded. By 2 p.m., the HOA's big event was in full swing. Guests in pressed khakis and pastel jackets sipped champagne. Kids danced near balloon animals. The county commissioner shook Judge Lockhart's hand with a grin that made my stomach turn. From my upstairs window, I watched through binoculars. The ground around the bathroom area darkened, then puddled, then stank. By 3:45, just as Mrs. Lockhart took the stage in her white pantsuit and began boasting about community unity, someone screamed. Then came the stench. A tide of foul water surged up through the party tents, catching picnic blankets, plastic tablecloths, and dignity in its wake. People stumbled and slipped. High heels stuck in the mud, expensive slacks stained beyond salvation. And in the midst of it all, the banner above the stage read proudly, "Pinerest Gardens, a community that cares." I nearly laughed, not because it was funny, but because the earth itself had finally spoken. The sheriff showed up around 4:30, looking miserable. "Mrs. Lockhart says you sabotaged their event," he told me as rain pelted his wide-brimmed hat. I handed him my folder. "These are original maps, my grandfather's irrigation system. Their pipes connected without permission. I didn't add anything. I just removed what was never theirs." He looked at the documents, then back at the mess unraveling across my property. "I'll be honest with you," he said. "This may get messy." I nodded. It already is. But for the first time in weeks, I felt peace. They thought they could rewrite boundaries with money and power. But they forgot. Water remembers. The Monday after the barbecue disaster, I sat in silence, watching the footage play on the local evening news. There was Mrs. Lockhart, caught mid-scream, her once pristine white pantsuit stained in murky browns and grays. Behind her, a reporter narrated the scene. Community celebration turned sour as suspected plumbing failure leads to sewage spill on disputed land. Disputed land. That phrase stuck. The truth hadn't fully broken through yet, but the cracks were showing. By Tuesday, something unexpected happened. Neighbors started knocking. First Elaine, then the Patels, then an older gentleman I barely knew, hat in hand. They weren't just there to gawk or gossip. They came to apologize. "I didn't know," one said softly. "I believed what they told us, that you were just being difficult." I just nodded. No need for, "I told you so." The land had already said enough for me. That week, word got around that the HOA board would be holding an emergency town hall meeting, officially to address recent misunderstandings. Unofficially, it was to clean up their public image. I showed up 5 minutes early. The community center was packed to the walls. Seniors, young families, long-timers, newcomers. Even the sheriff stood in the back, arms crossed. And at the center of it all, Mrs. Lockhart sat at a long folding table beside her husband, Judge Lockhart, and the ever-smug Mr. Thompson. "Let's begin," she said, forcing a smile. "First, I'd like to address the unfortunate incident during our summer celebration." "Let's address the land theft first," someone called from the back. It was Mrs. Patel. Her voice shook, but she stood tall. "Tell them how you forged signatures, how you filed fake permits. Tell them what you really planned to build on James Richardson's farm." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Lockhart paled but kept composure. "That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Patel." "It is," said Frank, my lawyer, stepping up beside me, "which is why we brought evidence." He clicked a remote. The projector screen lit up. Emails, permits, maps with altered boundaries. And then, the clincher, an audio file. Judge Lockhart's voice echoed over the speakers. "No one will question the signature. Just make sure the property description matches. The cabins go in by August." The room froze. Every head turned toward the judge, whose face was now drained of color. "This is illegal," he muttered. "This is entrapment." "No, Harold," said a voice from the back. It was Diane, the former HOA assistant, stepping forward bravely. "It's the truth, and I kept records." From her purse, she pulled a thumb drive and handed it to the sheriff. "I've seen enough," the sheriff said, signaling to the deputies. "Judge Lockhart, Mrs. Lockhart, you're both under investigation for fraud, forgery, and illegal use of public office." The deputies stepped forward. The crowd broke into murmurs, then applause, then cheers. As the Lockharts were let out, Mr. Thompson tried to slink away. But a small woman in gardening gloves blocked his path. "Not so fast," she said. "You fined me $300 for my sunflower patch. Time we had a little chat." I stood outside the center as the sun began to set, watching neighbors, many who once avoided my eyes, shake my hand, pat my back, thank me. Not because I'd done something heroic, but because I'd reminded them what a neighbor truly is. The following spring, the old field bloomed again. But this time, not just with winter wheat. Where once there were angry signs and trespassing tents, there now stood neatly marked garden plots. Rows of vegetables, bright with promise, and flowers that danced in the breeze, and laughter, real laughter, echoed from families planting side by side, hands in the soil, hearts finally at peace. After the court ruled in my favor and the fraudulent HOA contracts were nullified, something shifted in the air. Not just relief, but resolve. The community had seen what unchecked power looked like, and they wanted better. So they came together, not out of obligation, but out of shared purpose. It was Elaine who first suggested we do something with the back acre of my land. "What if we made a real space," she said, "for real people?" With her help, and the guidance of a few wise folks who'd been through more than their fair share, we formed a new community group. No titles, no boards, just neighbors who wanted to grow something good. We called it the Richardson Community Garden, in honor of my grandfather who'd taught me that land is more than dirt, it's legacy. And wouldn't you know it, even some of the old naysayers showed up to help till the ground. Mr. Thompson never said sorry outright, but he did donate compost and show up with his grandson every Saturday. That said more than words ever could. Elaine organized weekend workshops for kids. Mrs. Patel handled the planting calendar. And I just watched. Watched as my land, once the battleground of lies and lawsuits, became a place of learning, healing, and quiet joy. The broken bathroom structure was torn down, replaced by a wooden bench carved with names of every volunteer who helped rebuild. And every now and then someone would stop me and ask, "How'd you hold your ground when it got that bad?" I always gave the same answer. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. You just need to know the land you're standing on, and the truth you carry with you. I still farm, I still miss Sarah, and I still talk to Grandpa when I walk the fields. But now, I don't walk them alone. This wasn't just a win against a crooked HOA. It was a rebirth of community, one that finally remembered its roots. As the sun set over my farm one quiet evening, I found myself sitting on the old bench by the orchard, watching kids run between rows of tomato vines, their laughter carried by the wind. The land was peaceful again. And more than that, it was safe. I realized then that this story, my story, was never just about property lines or plumbing permits. It was about something much deeper. It was about what happens when good people are pushed too far. For those of us who've lived a little longer, we've seen the world change. We've seen things go from handshakes and trust to red tape and backroom deals. But what this journey reminded me is that some values don't go out of style. Integrity, courage, community. These things still matter. They always will. My grandfather used to say, "A man's worth isn't measured by the acres he owns, but by what he protects." And in the end, that's what I was doing. Not just protecting land, but protecting a memory, a legacy, a promise that what's been built with hard work and sacrifice won't be taken by slick talk or shady signatures. To anyone out there, especially my fellow seniors, who feel like the world's moving too fast or like your voice doesn't matter anymore, let me tell you something. It does. When we speak up, when we stand our ground, when we lean on one another, we become a force even the strongest bully can't silence. We don't need to yell. We don't need to fight dirty. But we do need to show up, and we need to stand firm when the moment calls for it. Because if we don't protect what's rightfully ours, who will? In the end, the land was restored. The HOA was held accountable. But more importantly, neighbors who had been isolated by fear and silence finally found each other. We built something together, not just gardens and fences, but trust. And in this day and age, that might be the rarest crop of all. So if you're ever wondering whether it's too late to make a difference, or whether one person can really change anything, remember this. Sometimes the quietest resistance plants the strongest roots. And those roots? They hold fast, even in the fiercest storm. Because in life, as on the farm, when you stand for something true, it will grow.